everyone. It's Nancy, a Greater Orlando realtor, and Juan coming to you for episode 5, I think it is, of our real estate SpeedCast. Juan, go ahead, take it away. This is our first time doing it over Zoom, so I want to point that out. If you see this, it worked. If you never see it, it didn't work. Our special guest today, Juan.
Juan is here, Orlando real estate agent, Central Florida real estate agent with Redfin, of course. And we do have a special guest today with Title Forward. You want to introduce her, Miss
Hey,
Nancy?
thanks for showing up today early on the morning.
You're very welcome. I had a nice brisk cold walk to school with my boys this morning, so I am awake and ready to go.
Well, we have Max Maxwell, and she is one of the big top echelon people with Title Forward, a wealth of knowledge. Max, how long have you been doing title services as far as in that world?
I have been in the title business for 11 and a half years, so I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen the market go up, I've seen it go down, I've seen it go sideways, turn around in
Mhm.
circles, all the things.
Fantastic. So we bring Max so that way we can try to give a little bit of a helicopter view of, for this podcast, the seller. What happens when the seller has gone under contract with the buyer and the listing side and the buyer agent side send all the documentation to the title company, which would be Max's office, and what is her steps going from order to closing and fulfilling the order? So Max, could you take us through those first initial steps that occur when the order comes across on your email or in the portal?
Yeah, absolutely. So once we receive the contract, that's how we get the actual title order. We receive a contract from typically the listing agent. Sometimes we'll get it from the buyer's agent. Sometimes we'll get it from both of them at the same time.
Mhm.
But what we're initially doing when you guys first go under contract is we're collecting all contact information for all the parties that are involved with the contract. We want to get the lender's information if there is a lender. We want to get every single real estate agent that's involved and every buyer and seller that's involved. So that's the very first thing that we do. And depending on the type of property that we're dealing with, we will start ordering all of our searches. The first search that we're going to order is the title search, and we're searching the back chain of title. And that can be found in public record. And then we're also doing a municipal lien search, and those are done on each individual municipality. So it sort of just depends on where the property is located as to how that is conducted. And then in addition to that, we're also going to be ordering an estoppel if the property is in an HOA community or if it's a condo where they have a condo association. So those are like the very first things that we kind of start getting the ball rolling with
Mhm.
everyone. And then like the most important thing when buyers go under contract, the seller is expecting the earnest money deposit to show good faith that they are indeed very serious about purchasing this property, and they definitely want to abide by the contract. Typically, we see that it's negotiated right around 3 days that the buyer is to turn in the money to the title company or
Mhm.
the escrow officer that's holding money in escrow for the transaction. So basically, we will get the wiring instructions out to the buyer. That's the safest way to
Mhm.
exchange money. At Title Forward, that's our number one way that we like to accept earnest money deposits. So we work in a portal, it's called Qualia. That's where we work up all of our settlement statements and all of our closing documents for our buyers and for our sellers. And that is a really safe way for us to exchange documents. So that's our preferred way to exchange our wiring instructions. We do make exceptions, and we can send them via email, but that's our preferred method. And then we also offer a platform called Earnest. Earnest is sort of like an e-check. It's like a combination of a check and a wire. And basically what happens is the purchaser will set up their bank account with Earnest. And then from there, when they go to initiate the transfer of funds, Earnest verifies that there are sufficient funds in the purchaser's or in the buyer's bank account so that the title company knows the money's on the way, there's sufficient funds,
Okay.
and then it takes about 3 business days for the money to clear our bank account. So it's a little bit faster than a personal check. And then it's a little bit slower than a wire, but just as safe and secure as a wire, just a different method. And at Title IV, we do offer Earnest as a free alternative to a wire transfer. So those are some good information, good little tidbits to know. I'm sure other title companies offer things like that to buyers, but we like to make sure that we try to keep every buyer in mind to try to save as much money as possible. So we do offer that as a free service for them to turn in their earnest money deposit.
Fantastic. So you mentioned two things, lien searches and estoppel. So what is a lien search? Like if a seller's not familiar with that term, what kind of search is that? Like what are you looking for?
So there's unrecorded liens that can happen to a home, and those are recorded within the municipality. Um, when you do a title search, those are liens that are attached to the title of the property. And then when you do a municipal lien search, those liens are not necessarily attached in the same way. So they don't necessarily attach the same way that they do when they're attached to the title of the property. They
Okay.
still are attached to the address, but not necessarily the title of the property.
So an
Um,
example of that would be something like a roofer, like you put a roof on your house and then they attach something to the house to make sure you fulfill payment at the end. Would that be a good example of something that could be attached to your house that you may not know about?
That is a great example. There's contractors liens that can be out there. There's code enforcement liens that can be out there. It really is a great idea. I always try to let every buyer know, if you're purchasing with cash, you don't necessarily have all these requirements, but it is a great idea to still do a title search, to still do a municipal lien search. I even tell people, if you're purchasing, you want to inspect everything, not just the home. You're inspecting the title. You're trying to
Mhm.
get all these things done within the inspection period of the contract. So if you are purchasing something where there's a well, you want to get the well inspected within the inspection period of the contract. If you are purchasing a property where there's septic tanks, you want to make sure that you're getting that inspection done within the inspection period. So you're not just inspecting the bones of the home, you're
Mhm.
inspecting a lot of the other things as well. So that title search, like you're inspecting the title, the back chain of title. When you do a municipal lien search, you're inspecting the municipality to see if there's anything that's attaching to the home. So those are just some things that, title takes
Yeah.
care of in the background to help,
Yeah.
ease the mind of the purchaser when they purchase the home that, they did purchase something that has clear and marketable title, and they're not going to have a lien or an open permit out there kind of lingering around in the background.
Do lenders require clear title?
So yes, lenders do require a lender's title insurance policy. So they do require clear title
Okay.
because you can't provide a lender title insurance policy without having clear title
Okay.
on them.
Okay.
So every single loan that's out there that's being used to purchase a home, there's also a lender's title insurance policy attached to that.
And if they're
Fantastic.
not a
So,
lender, they can close if there's liens on the property, or if there's no lender involved, if it's I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but technically they can purchase the house with liens. How does that work?
yeah,
Anybody can purchase a home in any condition that they want to, as long as they want to purchase that home, and they have the cash to do so. Um, you know, I personally wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't want to purchase something that has, a code enforcement lien on there
mhm.
that, has been racking up fines because it hasn't been paid. If it's a commercial property, those can sometimes get really expensive very quickly. So I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you have the capital to do it and it's worth it for what your project is and what your end goal is, then maybe I would, and maybe I would pay it off. But if I don't have the capital to do that,
Right.
I'm not going to purchase a single family home that I want to live in if
Yeah.
I know it has a lien on it. So that's just my personal opinion. I would not make that decision for myself.
Right. So if it's financed or either way, and things show up on the municipal lien, at closing, they're getting paid from the proceeds in order to continue the transaction and get to closing.
That can happen, yes. So if something comes back on title, or if, something comes back as on the municipal lien search, or, even if it is something comes back on the estoppel and the homeowners are in violation of some sort, depending on what the violation is, it could be paid at closing. A lot of times with homeowner associations, they want it to be inspected and cleared
Mhm.
before closing. Um, so most of the time with homeowners associations, that's going to have to be done beforehand. But if it's depending on what it is, so for example, if we find out that 2023 and 2024 tax bill has not been paid and we're purchasing here in 2025, we can pay that with the
Okay.
proceeds through closing. So that's an example of something that can get paid. If repairs are made, from the time that the property goes under contract to the time that it gets closed, depending on the contractor, we might be able to pay them at closing. It really is, dependent on the specific situation and what it is, if it can be paid through the proceeds at closing. But we like to try to make it work as easily as possible. And sometimes I know that sellers don't have cash in hand until after they do get their proceeds. So, you know, a lot of times people can be mindful of that and kind of work around. And, sometimes it's just not doable. So it really is, specific on the situation.
So it seems like to me that on the listing side, when a agent is representing the seller, they need to have the experience to know what might or might not work and reconcile that with the title company. So that way they can confirm and verify solutions to bring it back to the seller for clearance. Not just assume, but they have to coordinate.
Absolutely. That's why it's really important for agents to have a good relationship with a title company. It's nice to have a partner that you can reach out to and kind of bounce those things back
Yeah,
and forth. What we like to do for our agents that work with us is when you guys get a listing agreement, we like to do a title search right away so that if something does come back on title, we can help you and your seller work through that before you go under
yeah,
contract so that, hey, maybe you do get a cash buyer and they want to move in right away. If we have already done the title search and we, cleared any clouds that were on title or anything to that nature, it kind of just speeds up the process a little bit better and it makes the experience for the seller and for the buyer a lot better because everything's already ironed out and you just are kind of going through the process of, exchanging money at that point.
How long is that good for? So you do a title search pre-listing or when we get the listing contract and we don't go under contract for now 3 months. Is that title search still good or do we have to repeat?
So what we would do is we would do an update and the update is $25. So it's a very minimal fee to kind of just know that everything is ready to go when you guys are under contract. And if you guys go under contract, before that time of it expiring and needing to get an update, you know, we don't have to get the update.
Yeah,
yeah.
So yeah.
that's the goal. Let's do it quick, but doesn't.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And then, just so you know, there always is an update done anyway, because we do a search in the beginning and then time passes by from the time that search is done to the time that we actually close. But we do a closing protection letter, which basically guarantees that we're gonna research
Mhm.
research that time, that gap from the time that we've done the initial title search to the day that we've closed.
That's good to know. I know I've had roofs go on a house a week or two before closing, and you guys have been able to locate that, and we get that cleared so there's nothing attached to the house, even though the owner that I have has paid it. But we don't want the new owner to catch it and then there's something attached to the house 2 years later, and then you're chasing a roofer that's no longer in business. So I know that
Yeah.
can come up. So
Solar panels,
thank you for
or have
that.
solar panels too, that may or may not be either assumed at closing or paid off at closing. How does that?
What was the first part of what you said, Nancy? I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
People that have leases or finance solar panels, how does that affect title when we get there?
Ooh, so we've come a long way with those programs
Yeah.
and how it works with the transferring of title. Um, when we first started closing with those programs, it was very difficult because they would not let us transfer the lien over into the other person's name sometimes, which was basically like transferring the loan over into the new owner's name. Um, so now, depending on the company, sometimes they will let the new owner take on that expense and take on that loan, if you will. Um, and in the very beginning, when we started dealing with this, what was it, like about 6 or 7 years ago is when I started seeing them a lot. Um, Basically the owner would have to pay them off,
Yeah.
was how the route what that was taken. And then there was a lot of pushback because some owners were like, well, I'm not benefiting from these solar panels anymore, so why am I paying them off? That's something that you're benefiting from, new buyer. So now a lot of times what will happen is they will allow the lien to transfer over to the new owner's home if they're purchasing a new home. So they'll allow that lien to attach that way, or they will remove the lien for the duration of closing and then put the lien back on the home with the new owner so that, the mortgage, the lender can be in first lien holder position, and then
Mhm.
the PACE loan or whatever program, the UCC loan, whatever program they go through, will be in second lien holder position. So, we've come a long way from being like, sellers, you got to pay it off before we close, to,
Yeah.
all right, now we just have to navigate what's allowed by whichever company we're dealing with. So it's situational, I hate to say that again, but I mean, that's a lot of what real estate is. It's,
Yeah.
property specific. So it would depend on the company that put the solar panels on there, and then it would also depend on the company that holds the loan. So whatever bank holds the loan, like if they're, you know, willing to work with us and do what it takes to become second lien holder position to a mortgage.
That makes perfect sense. I had one I closed with you guys about 7, 8 months ago, and the buyer agreed to assume the installment loan for the solar panels, and the installment loan company refused to do the full balance because they said the solar panels had depreciated in value. So we had to do an adjustment of the whole offer package, and instead of assuming 38,000 or so dollars, the buyer was able to assume, I think it was 28,000 or so. So there was 1,000 variance that we had to negotiate in the contract on on the same contract, but just a different pocket in the same pair of pants. So
Yeah,
that just shows me that when we're at the listing appointment, disclosing information and gathering information is really critical so we can have the seller be successful. Because when you get to the end of a transaction, if this comes up, the buyer could perceive this is the sign from God to not go forward when it has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with process, right? It's just part of the
right.
process.
Working through the paperwork
Yeah.
really is what it is.
Yeah, sitting in somebody's inbox for 4 days just because you're number 47 in line, not because you're bad or they don't like you. They just haven't got to you yet, right? It's just part of that process. And it doesn't mean you guys aren't poking all the time, because I know you guys are great pokers, because we've done a lot of deals together, and I know you guys chase it just like we do. So we talked about associations, liens, just things that can happen for sellers, solar panels. Let's talk about these payoffs for mortgages. So you guys do request getting payoffs, and some lenders require a wet signature, which is what they call it, and some will do just to give you a payoff if you ask for one.
Yes, it's fun collecting payoffs.
Okay.
Um, I wish I could tell you that there's like this one awesome process and it happens
Well,
the
there's
same.
not one portal you log into for a payoff.
Yeah, everything.
I mean, there's one portal for each bank basically.
Okay.
It's not some of them do have it is fun collecting payoffs. A lot of times we'll be on hold for a very long time. Sometimes we do have to have the seller sign something in order for us to be allowed to get the payoff. Essentially, the number one thing that every agent needs to let their seller know is that the title company is going to be reaching out to them and they are going to be asking very personal questions. Um, and it gets personal when it comes to the payoff because that's when we start talking about their money and what their bottom line could potentially look like is based off of their payoff. And in order for us to get a payoff, we need social security numbers. So, we're going to be asking for that information. And if a seller is not expecting to get asked that information from someone, or they don't remember the name of the title company and Nicole or Crystal's reaching out from them and
Yeah.
asking their social security number, if they haven't had their coffee yet in the morning, sometimes, people's spidey senses start tingling and they're like, what's going on? Is fraud happening to me? Is somebody trying to steal my identity? And then oftentimes what will happen is they'll get off the phone with us, call their agent and be like, hey, Juan,
Is that
so
right? Yeah.
Crystal just called me and she's asking me for my social security number. And then you'll be like, yeah, she needs that to get your payoff
Yeah.
information. So yes, we're going to ask a lot of personal information and not for nothing, but this sale gets recorded publicly
Yeah.
and gets reported to our government. So, taxes have to get paid in that regard. And if capital gains taxes are a thing that apply to the situation, it's just part of the process. So we're going to be asking for information and we need that information to obtain the payoff and to, go through the rest of the process. So,
What is the rest of the process? So now we have like clear title, we have all the
right.
we need, and now what happens?
Okay, so good question. Title's clear. We got the municipal lien search back, nothing crazy is on there. Um, we got the estoppel back and there are no violations. The homeowner has been an awesome homeowner for that association. They bring their garbage cans back inside every day like clockwork after they get picked up. Um, so from there, we're gonna reach out to the seller and usually we get all the seller things back first. And if there's a loan involved, usually we're working with the lender mostly at the end, and usually the seller things have been taken care of. So we like to try to get our sellers to sign early so that they're just waiting on the buyer to sign and for funding to happen. So essentially, we'll reach out to the seller and we'll schedule signing for them. We like to make signing as convenient as possible. So we offer to have a notary come out and meet them at a location of their choice. We also offer in-office signings, and then we also offer signings at any Regis location throughout the state and actually throughout the nation. If your sellers are also living in another state, or if they're going to be on a super long vacation somewhere, we can make accommodations for that as well. Um, if you do know that your seller is going to be out of state and more specifically out of the country, let us know that
Mhm.
in the very beginning because we can make accommodations. However, depending on where they're at, they might need to make an appointment at an embassy, and sometimes those appointments are not easy to get. So it is beneficial to know this in the very beginning. So if they do need to make an appointment and it's not going to happen for 45 days, but our closing date is 30 days out, let's make everyone aware of that. Like, hey, sellers are not going to be able to sign until 45 days. There's nothing we can do about it. So knowing that information beforehand, or hey, maybe we can get a power of attorney signed if it works for the situation that we're in, and we can, troubleshoot and make things happen. But having powers of attorney signed, that takes time also. So, knowing things that are going to be hurdles, if we know those hurdles in the very beginning, we can jump through them and make the process as smooth as possible for everyone involved. The sooner we know that, the sooner we can smooth it out for everyone. So yeah, everyone signs, and then if there's a loan involved, we're gonna get the lender's money, and we're gonna get cash to close from the buyer. If it's a cash deal, we're just gonna be waiting on cash to close from the buyer, and the buyer will sign. Cash deals are very easy. The documents that to sign are minimal. When there is a loan involved, there are a lot more documents to sign pertaining to the loan and the mortgage. So, keep that in mind. Whether you're a buyer or sellers, you're probably going to be in and out in there in 30 minutes. If we're doing our job, you're going to correctly, and we're doing it at a high level like we like to do, you're going to see your settlement statement before the day you close. So any questions that you have, you should have already had them answered before you sit in front of the documents that you're going to sign. I do know that it could be a little bit different for buyers because, sometimes things will change last minute with your lender, but you still should know everything, whether you're a buyer or seller, before you're sitting down. And then, sometimes you'll have questions about taxes, or like what happens, after closing, when am I going to get my money as a seller? So when you're a seller, everybody wants their proceeds, right? And sometimes you're purchasing a home the same day that you're selling one, and that can be really crazy, right? So what we do is we can wire your funds, or we can FedEx overnight a hard like paper check to you. I will praise a wire all day long over a paper check because of the amount of fraud that's out there. Even with FedEx and UPS, you never really know what's going to happen. So I prefer to tell everybody to, do the wire. It's the best option. And hey, you get your money a lot faster as well. It clears your bank a lot faster. So there's just so many more benefits to doing a wire as opposed to getting a personal check, or a paper check, I should say. It's not a personal check, business check.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
you can wire that money to the next title company if they're buying.
absolutely. So that's correct. If we're doing a same day closing where the seller is also purchasing, if we're not handling the purchase, we can absolutely wire the proceeds over to the other title company that's handling their purchase. That's not a problem. What will happen is we will ask the ask the seller for the contact information for their purchase when they're acting as the buyer with that title company. And then we'll reach out to that title company and ask them for their wiring instructions. And then we will confirm their wiring instructions before we send the proceeds over to that title company. And in addition to, when the seller is signing, they're going to sign a disbursement authorization form that literally tells us all that information and confirms it with us as well, so that they're giving us written instruction to do what they're asking us to with their money. So we're not just willy-nilly sending it over to another title company. We want documentation that is indeed, the instructions that they're giving us to do.
So what happens if the seller, say they're selling a house for 500,000 and that's their proceeds, and they're buying a house for 350,000? Do they get two wires? One goes to the title company for their purchase, and the remaining goes to their private account. Can you do that as well?
Absolutely. So that will be outlined on that disbursement
Okay.
authorization form.
Okay.
And so, we'll be asking for wiring instructions for their personal bank account, or if they want a check sent for the additional proceeds that would not get sent over to the other title company for their purchase, we can
Sure.
absolutely, make arrangements for that. That's not a problem.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of gives us that view that we were looking for. Obviously, when you're doing all the seller stuff, you're also doing a second step of all the buyer stuff, and somehow you figure out how to put it all together on one piece of paper at the end. So we'll
We
we'll
do.
go over the buyer stuff in the near future, hopefully. We didn't want to make it confusing at all. It's already kind of confusing a little bit, but that's why we have you. That's why we sell the houses and you close them out for us. Nancy, did you have any other questions for Mrs. Max
I
before
mean,
we wrap
I
up?
find that your team is always available for my questions. Like I emailed Nicole the other night because I have a seller traveling Thailand, China. We didn't list the house yet, but like what's going to happen at closing. You've already answered that today, but all those questions that I have, you're so readily available to make that happen beforehand, and I appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on here. Hopefully we actually see this again. We're recording. We'll see.
Yes.
Well,
We're
I'm
gonna
sure
do
we'll
a
definitely use it.
follow-up.
Yeah.
I look forward to doing the buyer follow-up with you too.
Thank you so
And
much, Max. Thank you for helping us today.
Yes.
absolutely. We're here truly to be your partners to get deals closed for you. So you bring them to us and we're going to get them closed.
Thank you, Max.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.